Scenario. You come home from work and you're going through your mail and you come across a letter that says a registered sex offender will be moving in next door to you. How many of you feel happy about that? Yeah, not so much. I understand, right? Why? I say registered sex offender. What comes to mind? If you're being honest, right? What sort of traits come to mind? Creepy old guy, molesting a young girl, that sort of thing. So the thoughts, negative traits associated with that category, registered sex offender. The feeling, negative feelings because those traits tend to be negative. Impossible behavior. I'm going to avoid that person, keep my kids away from that person. So you went from thinking to feeling to potential behavior in milliseconds in your mind, right? Some of you, this is automatic. Some might have taken a bit more time, but nonetheless, pretty quickly. What is implicit bias? For those who don't know, watch my video. All right, a couple of weeks ago, I did a video on what is implicit bias and why do I have it? Okay, implicit bias is when stereotypes, which are group trait associations, can affect how we think, feel, or behave at a subconscious level. I said registered sex offenders. You might have thought recluse, socially awkward in terms of the traits came to mind. Maybe mentally unhealthy in terms of this male. You might have thought those traits associated with those groups, right? Feelings were negative. Behavior, I'd avoid them. Thinking, feeling, behavior very quickly. Okay. If we're just sort of being honest about this. But say you do some investigation. You look into the case online or have some conversation with a neighbor and you come to find out that this person moving in next door was not the traditional sex offender. What do I mean? Well, several years back, before many Romeo and Juliet laws were passed, right, you had some interesting scenarios. So say in certain states, statutory rape, there was a cutoff age of statutory rape, okay? Say it's 16 years old, and you have a 17-year-old, say you have high school students, 17-year-old male that has sexual relations with a 15-year-old female, okay? The parents of the female find out, they're upset, want to press charges, they do so. The young man is convicted. Why? It's statutory. He goes to jail, comes out as what? A registered sex offender. Now, would you think differently about that scenario than your first association, creepy old guy sort of thing? Exactly. Now, we understand that in the 80, maybe even 90% plus of cases involving registered sex offenders, it was bad, it was traditional, stereotypical scenario. But sometimes it may not be. The notion is, are you the type of human being, right, that will collect enough evidence to come to a conclusion, or do we just make assumptions? There may be a kernel of truth to our assumption, but we don't really know it. It's still a perception, right? You might be right in certain cases when you gather information, or you may not be. So when we talk about implicit bias, it's not just about race, gender, and age, right? It could be a variety of bases of bias. I just gave you another one. But I just want to sort of give these scenarios as we go through, just sort of keep you on your mental toes, but also show you the various ways with which bias can occur. Okay, so I am Dr. Bryant Marks, founder, Chief Equity Officer at the National Training Institute on Race and Equity, tenured professor of psychology at Morehouse College, national anti-bias trainer, under the broad umbrella of DEI, which I think is sort of getting a bad rap these days. We can talk about that. Watch another video. What is DEI and why does everybody need DEI training? Watch that video as well. That can help you out with that one. Okay. So we're we're in part 2 of our 3-part series, right? On, here we go, let me pull this up for you. So you can see the title in its full splendor here. And it'll bring things, make things come alive. Okay, hold on. Let's put up over here. All right, I'll wait for a second. So this is a Break Your Bias series. Brakes like brakes on a car. We slow down our thinking. Why are all, scratch that, most, scratch that, many, scratch that, some people racist? Part 2. We're going to talk about 6 key causes of racism, or 6 reasons why people are racist. So you ever wonder why somebody racist, Ku Klux Klan, whatever the case may be? We're going to talk about those things. Once we are done, you will understand why some, not all, right? Why some people are racist, okay? All right, so let's bring myself over here. Get us in this corner. There we go. All right, folks, here we go. Racism. So this is a review real quick. I gave you this definition in our last video. We define racism, when we talk about racism, it's been defined in several ways, okay? There's no 100% consensus amongst definition amongst social scientists, but the following definitions are common. The first one A system of advantage based on race. Now, this is probably the most long-standing definition of racism among social scientists. It's systemic. It's a macro. Institutions, healthcare system, criminal justice system, a lot of policies and practices that affect large groups of people nationally, usually even statewide, but big groups of people. Next, I'm sorry about that. Next, the transformation of racial prejudice through exercise of power against a racial group perceived as inferior. We talk about this as more of an intermediate level. You're CEO of a company or organization, you're a council person, you're chief of police. So you have some power. So your bias does impact people, but it's not national. It's not as macro. Okay. And then we have the individual definition, which is what we're going to focus on today. Okay. Beliefs, attitudes, institutional arrangements, and acts, right, that tend to denigrate individuals or groups because of phenotypic, biological characteristics or ethnic group affiliation. This does not require power, right? It can be symbolic or aversive. I defined symbolic and aversive racism in our last video as well. So it does not require power. So with this definition, at the individual level, anyone can be racist, right? So me as one black person, right, I could believe my racial group is superior to other groups and act accordingly in my day-to-day sphere of influence as one person, not macro, not systems, just me, one-to-one sort of thing, okay? So we're going to focus on this right now because you may come across folks who are individually racist, strong beliefs and things like that. And it seems like, why do you think that way? Why do you feel that way? We're going to break that down. So we're not talking about systems today, and we're not talking about as much power as we are the individual. Okay. All right. Oh, by the way, this bias individual can occur at the implicit or explicit level. So first of the 6 reasons why many, some people are racist, but this also applies to sexism, ageism, and other biases as well. All right, here we go. Categorization. Our mental tendency to group things, including people. Okay. So, for example, if I said to you, let's say apple, what would you think? Red, green, yellow, apple pie, applesauce, apple juice, that sort of thing. All right. So when I say the word iPhone, MacBook, Apple computer, if I say to you apple, right, it's a concept, but there's a cognitive map, related terms around it. So when I say apple as a category, different things come to mind. You're not a bad person, but you live in this society and you have a brain. The 2 ingredients for implicit bias. You live in this society, you have a brain. And in our society, in terms of apples, these are the various forms, amongst others, in which they can come. Okay? All right, so I say apple. Now, that's a thing. This also applies to people, right? What do I mean? If I said, for example, so say you met a police officer for the first time, right? Met a police officer, right? You wouldn't have to ask him, oh, do you have a gun and a badge? Did you go to police academy? It comes with the category, right? So once you meet somebody, black, white, Hispanic, Asian, male, female, old, young, those categories in the U.S. are loaded with information that you can use when you encounter somebody from that group one-on-one. And usually that process works. But sometimes we get it wrong. You meet somebody from another group. Please understand, folks, the psychological science says that in the U.S., if you were born and raised here or been here for a while, as soon as you see another human being, your brain in milliseconds will immediately attempt to categorize them according to race, gender, and age, automatically in milliseconds. Why? Our minds are built to be efficient. Thinking in categories is very efficient, right? If I say to you, nurse, and you think female, you're not sexist because 92% of nurses in the U.S. are female, right? So you just lived a life where you were overexposed to female nurses, overexposed to male police officers, that sort of thing. If you keep it at that level, we're good. If you convert it into some sort of character flaw, that's different, right? So we've trained over 60,000 police officers across the U.S., right? So this is sort of a funny picture. You got the donut here. All right, so there's a stereotype that police like donuts. Police like donuts. You know where that comes from? Talk to a cop. Right? In urban settings, really 70s, 80s, right? Sort of thing. Urban areas, right? The night shift. I'm on patrol 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, right? Most places are closed except that 24-hour diner or the donut shop opening at 4 or 5 o'clock, that sort of thing, right? It was the only thing open. So it wasn't that police like donuts more than anybody. Show me the data. Show me a national study of all people in all occupations and police score highest on liking donuts. People like donuts, right? I was walking through I trained Krispy Kreme. I was walking through the airport a couple years ago. It was a Krispy Kreme. I was like a rock star. Ooh, let me get some of that. And it was hot, warm, supple. Right? But the notion is people like donuts, Right? Matter of fact, police officers have told me they purposely do not eat donuts in public because it may reinforce that negative stereotype if you see it as negative. Okay? All right. Bottom line, certain things come to mind with different groups. Okay? Categorization. So number one, why people are biased is the way our brain functions. And usually that categorization process helps us. It's very efficient. Sometimes we get it wrong. You meet somebody from a certain group, as soon as you see them, race, gender, age activated, stereotypes along with it, but those stereotypes may not fit this particular person or situation. Number two, why are people racist? Some people. Minimal group effect. In-group favoritism occurs even when group membership is random. Folks, they've done studies. You could have a group of people, say you have 100 people, and you split them up according to shirt color. People with light colored shirts, you go into this room, dark colored shirts in that room. Shirt color, random, right? And then you have them doing exercise. They have conversations with each other. What are your hopes and dreams, your fears and insecurities? Some sort of bonding exercise. Cool. They come back together. Then you allow them to distribute resources randomly. You say, okay, pennies, M&Ms, Skittles, something minor, and say, okay, you can distribute these resources equally between the two groups or however you like. The science says that based upon shirt color in a conversation, these individuals begin to favor their group and give their own group members more resources, pennies, M&Ms, whatever the case may be. DC, right? So, bottom line, we tend to favor our in-group. We treat in-group members slightly or much better than out-group members. People who are like me, look like me, think like me, in groups. We all belong to groups. Biological family, work family, church, mosque, synagogue, fraternity, sorority, we all belong to groups. The science says we tend to treat in-group members slightly or much better than out-group members, right? Especially when it comes to resources. So you're giving them money, look like me, in my group, they're going to benefit. These folks over here, not like me, I'm hiding my resources. I'm saving it for later. That sort of thing. So, and this can happen in all sorts of ways. Just think about family, people closest to you. Do you treat them the same as strangers, other people down the street? No. Okay. So we treat in-group members slightly or much better than out-group members. It is the nature of the human condition. It's still a form of bias, differential treatment of another human being based upon the group to which they belong, but we understand it. We get it. Okay. Number three, why are some people racist? Lack of exposure to the diversity within other groups. We tend to be overexposed to our in-groups and underexposed to out-groups. And that can take a variety of forms. What do I mean? I was a graduate student at the University of Michigan, right? So I'm a social psychologist by training, my PhD in social psychology. And so I'm a graduate student instructor. I got about 25 students in the class. I'm doing my instructor thing. It's great. It's wonderful. And I had two Asian males in the room who sat near each other, right? And so one of them, I ask a question, and one of them raises their hand to answer the question. And I call on him by name, but I call on him by the other Asian male's name. He says, oh, no, that's not me. That's him. And I'm crushed, right? Because I'm a race guy. I'm supposed to know better than that. I'm like, oh, my goodness, I can't believe I did that. I switched the names up, I juxtapose them. You sit next to each other. They said, don't worry about all that. I just don't see how you got the two of us confused. I'm Korean. He's Vietnamese. And I was like, Folks, you got to understand. I grew up in Queens, New York, Queens Village, 217 for Hollis, around a bunch of African-Americans, Jamaicans, Haitians, and Puerto Ricans. Not many Asian folks. So I was underexposed to Asian Americans. But he's trying to explain to me, right? Different undertones, cheekbones, eye shape, that sort of thing. He schooled me, right? Because I was underexposed. Pro tip, folks, sometimes we got to give each other a little bit of the benefit of the doubt, right? Because in the moment, often when somebody says something biased or off-putting, you could pretty much tell whether it was evil or malicious. It was out of ignorance or naivete. So they knew, and I just made an innocent mistake. So I took the time to learn from them. Give each other a little bit of room. All right, some of y'all just want to pounce and jump whenever somebody says something. Relax. It's okay. Okay? All right. But anyway, lack of exposure. When you are underexposed to certain groups, you run the risk of seeing them through the lens of a stereotype. When you're overexposed to them, you understand their diversity, right? So we'll just keep on pushing after that. Okay. Next reason why some people are racist. Racialization for oppression. Powerful groups, let me move the other way. Powerful groups retain power through the use of stereotypes and prejudices. All right. What does this mean? So say you're in a caste system, right? And there's multiple levels of the caste, and you're in the top group. You're on top, right? But you say to yourself, I'm a good, moral, ethical person. How can I live in a society, in a system where there's groups on the bottom being oppressed? That does not sit well with me. You know what you're likely to do? The same thing that millions of people have done throughout the history of humankind. Rationalize. Well, they do look different than us. Different religion, different skin tone, different values. I guess the oppression is not that bad. We rationalize, tell ourselves rational lies in order to justify the oppression. Y'all like that? Rationalize, pretty good, right? But bottom line is, folks, this happened all over the world throughout the history of humankind. Let's take the U.S. During slavery, there was always good white folks. There's always good white folks here. At the extreme, you got the John Browns, the abolitionists fighting for justice, but you had a lot of white folks in the middle. Ethically, morally, they knew slavery it probably wasn't cool, but it's like all this propaganda. They're not the same as us, different religion, different culture. And so part of them was like, well, I guess, it's destiny. Maybe God set it up this way. And they would sort of acquiesce to the status quo. That sort of thing. We're an evil, malicious people. Now, the evil, malicious people exist? Yes, right? But there was some diversity of thought around this issue and so forth, okay? So we have to rationalize the oppression. Why? Because in societies with hierarchical structures, right, the group on top, if they're moral and ethical, they may have some dilemma with being on top unless they can justify it somehow by demeaning or looking down upon or creating stereotypes and prejudices related to the group on the bottom. Okay? So number 4, why are people racist? Because they rationalize their oppression. It seems like a given, like it's just that they're on top of the people on the bottom. Okay? All right. Next, why are people racist? Some people. Bias and self-esteem. Bias can be self-affirming. If other groups are seen as inferior, then my group, and thus I, must be superior. Please understand, for some people, they're not very impressive as individuals, but they belong to a privileged group, and they like that. And they will work tooth and nail to keep their group on top as long as they can, because their self-esteem depends on it. As an individual, not very impressive, not much going for them, whatever the case may be. So if they only process themselves, their traits, their skills, their abilities, competencies, maybe feel like a little down. But once they remember, but I'm part of a great group. My group is on top. My group is the top group. I'm feeling good now. So some people, have racial biases, racism at the extreme, right? Because they derive their self-esteem from their group being on top, and they would do whatever they can to keep their group on top because their self-esteem depends on it. Do you see? Okay. So another reason why some people are racist, because the self-esteem is tied to it. Okay. And I'm not saying this is all white people, right? You could be in other groups, other ethnicities. This is imagery, right? But the notion is, whatever the group is that's on top. Even you could be say it's another country. Say it's another country, right? And there's a group on top, but you're in the lower end of that top group in terms of income or whatever the case is, income level wise. You're in the lower group, right? But you're still not as bad as other groups lower than your group altogether. So you can say, well, I may not be rich or whatever, but at least I'm not one of them. So you could look down on other groups, okay? Even though you have low status within your privileged group. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. All right, so number 5, bias and self-esteem. Number 6, why are some people racist? Exposure and socialization. Folks, we simply learn it. From who? Family, teachers, peers, media, and of course, personal experience. So a couple of videos ago, I did the exercise, the fiance exercise. So I'll go back to that one if you could. I think it was actually part 1 of this series, the fiance exercise. But basically, you did not grow up in a vacuum. You grew up around your friends, family. And so, matter of fact, all right, real talk. If you want to know where your deepest biases come from, the ones that are hard for you to shake, who you would date, marry, that sort of thing, here's my advice to you. You want to understand your deepest biases? Rewind the videos of your lives. Go back to your childhood, to wherever you lived, and look in the next room. Most of our deepest biases come from the people we love. And that's just the truth. I'm not judging you. Same thing applies to me. But we've all been exposed to friends and family when we were children. We heard the jokes and the stereotypes and the prejudices and the biases. We heard them. Some of us bought into them. Some of us pushed back. But you have been exposed, right? So this notion where this comes from, family playing a key role, teachers through the school system, peers and so forth, the media. These, the media, that's a big one that comes up. Oh yes, the media. Now the media does play a role. But here's the deal about the media, right? In today's age, we have more choice over the media we consume than at any other point in human history. You turn on cable TV, got 700 channels. Turn on Netflix, got a bunch of options, right? Disney Plus, YouTube, thousands of options, right? You have lots and lots of choice. So yes, if you're talking about network news, the big three, Fox, CNN, MSNBC, there's more to that. I mean, you can watch Al Jazeera, you can watch BBC, you can watch PBS NewsHour. You're not locked into watching one of those three, right? So we have many, many choices. Now, the media can establish or reinforce certain biases. That is true. But also the biases that we already have can guide us towards certain media outlets that'll reinforce the bias we already have. So it can work both ways, right? So yes, the media can play a role in forming or reinforcing certain biases, but we also have choice in the media we consume. My advice to you, stretch yourself. Watch a cable news channel you wouldn't normally watch. Listen to a podcast you would normally listen to. Watch a documentary. Just expose yourself to difference, okay? So another reason why some people, right, are racist, have racial biases, yes, they learn it. It's not genetic. It's not genetic, okay? All right? You want to have a good time? Good time. You want to sort of reestablish your faith in the human condition? Go to a pre-K school at the end of the day. Don't be all creepy about it. Do that, right? But watch kids, 3 and 4 year olds, right, when they're leaving for the day, right? In a diverse school, Black, white, Hispanic, Asian, that sort of thing. They're hugging each other, loving on each other. Oh, I'm gonna miss you, that sort of thing. Here's the thing about kids. Please pay attention, right? Why? Because kids develop the notion of race around ages 3 or 4. They notice difference, skin color, and it's always like interesting. They'll say, "Ooh, look at that chocolate man and that vanilla woman." So they notice difference, but they don't add value. We do that. They know different skin color. They don't add stereotypes and traits. They don't do all that stuff. They learn that from us. Kids are pure, right? Initially, in terms of these biases sort of thing, until they learn from us through living in a society and having a brain. Okay. So number 6, why are some people racist? Exposure and socialization. We simply learn it from various sources. Okay. So to review, as we wrap up, reasons that some people might be racist also applies to sexism, ageism, and other biases. Now, folks, this is not an exhaustive list. This is 6 reasons or causes from the social scientific literature. This is not every reason. This is just some. Okay. All right. So to review, categorization, our mental tendency to group things, including people. Okay. Whether you group an object, group in people, your brain is going to function a certain way. Next, number 2, minimal group effect. We tend to favor our in-group members. We treat them slightly or much better than out-group members. It occurs when group membership can even be random. Next, lack of exposure to the diversity within other groups, right? We tend to be overexposed to our in-groups, underexposed to out-groups. Next, rationalization for oppression. Powerful groups often retain power through the use of stereotypes and prejudices. Next, bias and self-esteem. Bias can be self-affirming. If other groups are seen as inferior, my group and thus I must be superior. And finally, we simply learn it from from the sources of family, teachers, peers, media, and so forth. Again, to reinforce the notion, any human being can be on the receiving end of bias depending on the situation. You could be a 6'2", blonde-haired, blue-eyed, 28-year-old white male in America and still be on the receiving end of bias depending on the situation. Put that young man in a pre-K school as a teacher and have those female teachers, because pre-K tends to be like 96% female. Those female teachers, "Oh, are you sure you want this job? Are you sure that you can interact with students? Can you be caring and nurturing?" Yes. Or I'll put them in a nursing ward, that sort of thing. Right? But these are not bad people, right? But we come to associate certain groups with certain traits. And when that doesn't align, when there's dissonance, where there's a difference there, it's going to catch our attention and raise some questions that may reflect our biases because we associate certain groups with certain traits. Make sense? All right, cool. All right, so folks, next week is going to be part 3 of our 3-part series. Why are some people racist? And that's going to explore what does racial bias look like in the real world. So there I'm going to give you some real world and research examples, both implicit and explicit bias, about what racial bias, we're still taking the case of race in this series, what racial bias can look like, but it does have implications for other biases as well. Thank you so much, folks. Please like, subscribe, forward to your friends. It helps the algorithm and all of that. To our current clients, former clients, good to see you again. Hopefully this information is adding to what we've trained you on in the past. For those who don't know, we provide trainings on implicit bias in a variety of topics, virtually and in person. And we also have a learning management system, self-paced videos, where you can get some of this. The YouTube content is a similar quality of content we give in our training. So I'm not cheating you. This channel is designed to go above and beyond what I'm able to cover in our trainings, along with our training team. So thank you so much, folks. Until next time, peace and blessings.